Have you ever heard the sound of freedom? Have you ever heard the sound of freedom?
You're listening to The Flip Side with Noah Filipiak, connecting the reality of the gospel to the grid of life. You can support the podcast and pick up some sweet Flipside swag at www.patreon.com/Noah Filipiak.
What is up, Flipoponemi? Welcome back to The Flip Side, your third favorite podcast. As always, brought to you by Angry Brew. What you got in my mug here today? Head over to angrybrew.com, fivelakes.com. Use promo code FLIP and get 10% off your order. I'm going to pick up where we left off. Last episode, I was talking about codependency, among other things, and I started towards the end talking about this sense of self, reclaiming sense of self. And so go back and listen to part one of this whole conversation and how this ties into the gospel. And it really, if we're going to live out one, what Jesus says about loving our neighbor as ourself, first we have to love ourselves. And if we are to truly live into, we say we believe that God loves us and we believe that we are holy in his sight as his children, but we don't treat ourselves that way or see ourselves that way, then we're not fully experiencing this belief in his love, that we say we believe. And there is a treasure there. It's like unlimited credit card, debit card given to us by God. And, we've used $50 of it because there's just so much more there when we can move into this place of this sense of self, seeing ourselves the way that God sees us. So we talked about at the end of that that episode about this reclaiming sense of self is the opposite of codependency. And what this looks like is learning to be who you are. And by who you are, I mean who God made you to be. And God didn't make everyone the same. I mean, think about how Psalm 139 says, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And the diversity of all of creation is, I think, one of the greatest evidences that God created all of creation. You can look at the amount of plant life, the amount of microscopic life, the amount of ocean life. Not the amount, I guess that's the wrong word. The differences. I mean, just the differences and the crazy stuff you see in the ocean. My 9-year-old and I were looking up Google images of giant squids. And let me tell you, those things are weird and nasty, and I would never want to swim up next to one of those in the ocean, let alone goblin sharks, jellyfish, down to plankton and these massive schools of plankton, if that's even the right word, swarms that great blue whales swim by and eat. It's all these reasons not to go in the ocean, right? But you look at wildflowers and the diversity and just the colors and animal life. And then in humans, we're talking about ourselves. We have all of these beautiful skin colors and cultures and ethnicities. But within that, we have characteristic traits. If you follow any of the Enneagram, the Myers-Briggs, the DISC, Strengths Finder, you know that people aren't the same. And God didn't create us to be the same. And if we get into this state of being where we're trying to be the same as everyone else, what we're doing is we're putting on a front, and there's this sense of, it's called false self that we're putting on. And this false self, there's so many layers to it. But one is that my true self isn't okay. My true self isn't good enough. That was back with the codependency conversation last episode, that I need this external validation in order to be good. And to get this external validation, I'm going to be a people pleaser. I'm going to try to control other people and control their behavior and all these things that don't lead to freedom at all, or an enjoyment of life, an enjoyment of being the person that God intended for us to be. So when we look at our uniqueness, you can look at your uniqueness. And back to both that God created everyone fearfully and wonderfully made. Everyone is created in God's image. Genesis 1 tells us that. You don't have to even be a follower of Jesus to be good, in that you are made by God, you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and you're made in his image. But we get the double bonus for followers of Jesus that, Colossians 1:22, one of my favorite verses, certainly among other verses, but Colossians 1:22, God the Father looks at us and says, because of Jesus, you and I, his children, are holy, without blemish, free from accusation. That God the Father has the same love for you and I that he has for Jesus, the perfect Son of God, 100% God, 100% human, never sinned. And God the Father looks at Jesus and says, this is my Son whom I love and whom I'm well pleased. And that is how he sees you and I as his children. And how do we live into that freedom? Well, there's tons of connections here to living into that freedom. This is what I'm in the stage of growth and that I am in. It's in finding this sense of self. And some of these are practical ways. We talked last episode about how mental health, therapy, counseling, this is the way our brains are made. This is the way our central nervous systems are made. Our emotions are made, and the way our bodies handle those. And so there's a lot of truth here that of how God made us, and that when we learn and are humble ourselves and are willing to kind of put our guard down and go, okay, I'll give this a try, we find healing. We find the way that God intended our brains to work. And some of these in this episode are some of the practical ways of how to do that. How do you reclaim who you are, who God made you to be? And so I'd invite you to think back to your childhood. It could be any of the, it could be any of these. It might be difficult or impossible even for some to do this. But if you're able to, think back to a time, and it could just be maybe one episode in your life, but perhaps it's a whole season of your life, in your childhood, your teenage years, your college or young adult years. Certainly in my teenage years, and when I say look back at them, find a time or an episode where you were truly yourself. You did not care what other people thought of you. And in that not caring what other people thought of you, you were free, and in that freedom, you were doing things that were truly you. So this could have been the way you dressed. It could have been things you enjoyed, maybe certain hobbies that you had. And as I was going to mention, my teenage years, certainly my teenage years, and I think all of our teenage years are filled with not being our true self. They're filled with putting on this front and wanting to fit in and wanting to belong. And so to do that, we conform, right? And that's what I meant about sameness, being someone that we're not. And everyone's experience with that is different. You may have done things sinfully, things you wish you hadn't done or regret in order to fit in with the popular crowd. Everybody's story can be different. It doesn't have to be that. For my story, I think it was a lot of repressing who I really was because I didn't want to get made fun of. A lot of it was even not defending others who were being bullied or teased or made fun of by, the popular crowd that I wanted to be accepted by. I had my limits of what I would do to be accepted and as a Christian and Christ follower as a teenager. And I'm proud of that looking back. And as a result, I never was fully accepted into those groups. And I was comfortable with that. But there was still plenty of things I did that were not me. But in that same period of my life, I can look back at my high school youth group experience at my church. And it was very healthy. It was very positive. Certainly things, looking back, I still am ashamed of some of the things we said and did and people we made fun of. And part of that's just being, 14, 15, 16, 17. It is what it is. But I remember as I trace back to my childhood or to that period of time, as well as into college, we would make movies. I had a whole bin that I still have of costumes that we collected over time, various wigs and weird pants we found at the thrift store and weird glasses. And just all kinds of crazy things. And we would get together, a couple of friends, and we would make movies with the old video camera, the VHS tape. Entire VHS tape literally fits into the video camera. And we would just make up a movie. We did a movie called Gone in 60 Minutes instead of Gone in the popular movie at the time, Gone in 60 Seconds. And it was about our church van. We had a really old church van that wasn't even hardly drivable. And we drove it around town, and it was all rusty and just ugly and green. We made a movie about it. It was super fun. Or we'd make a movie about an upcoming event in our youth group, and you get the idea. But those are things I look back on and I go, I don't do that anymore, right? I don't make movies, or I reflected on that. I used to love doing that, and I would direct the movie. I'd have the ideas. We would go to sports games, both in high school and college. We would go to a minor league hockey game and paint our chests and wear wigs and dance. We got out on the ice. They invited us down, and I dove head first on the ice. This would have been in high school. I had a red B or something painted on my chest. This is the Dayton Bombers, minor league hockey. We collected all the little stuffed animals people threw on the ice for some fundraiser. And then I dove head first on my way out on the ice. I left this big red streak of paint on the ice, and I don't recommend doing that. I also created lots of red abrasions all over my chest and torso from the ice itself. But it was super fun, right? Those sorts of things. And in those in those environments, I felt safe. I was with people that I felt safe, and I did those sorts of things. And so the reason I bring those up is I'd invite you to think back of similar times in your life where the things we do now where we're trying to get the validation of others externally, we had a time when we put those things aside. And try to make a list. Make a list of the things you did, how it made you feel, hobbies that you had. And going into today, I mentioned the last episode, I was on Matt Dobschute's podcast called Porn Free Radio. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts from. It's episode 375. You can also find it at Matt's website, recoveredman.com/375. And in that, we were talking about codependency, sense of self, resentment. And that's what led me to do my last episode and this one, talking through some of those things with you. But on Matt's podcast, I talked about this last year. I've been seeing a new counselor, and it's just been super, super helpful to me. A lot of things tying together when it comes to codependency, as it relates to my marriage, as it relates to my role as a pastor and trying to sort of fix other people's lives, trying to get a church plant off the ground and look and survive and be sustainable and look successful to external eyes. Certainly all the metrics with writing books and podcasting and the whole thing as well. And one thing my counselor challenged me to do is, and I was uncomfortable with it. I'm uncomfortable telling you about it now, because there's something in my false self, even my evangelical background, that really pushes against this idea of self-help tactics. I mentioned that in part one of this on the flip side. But it was to look in the mirror, and this is research-backed, not thinking these things in your head, not writing them down, but looking in a mirror where you can see your own face, and out loud, nobody else is around, giving yourself affirmations about yourself. And I didn't want to do it. I resisted it. This is stupid. It feels stupid. I have so many issues, though. I was just at a point of, all right, I'll try anything. I'll listen to my counselor. Maybe he knows what he's talking about. And so I would. And I'm embarrassed, in a way, to say these to you now, because it can sound, some of the reasons we don't do this, especially as Christians, it can sound like we're boasting. We want to reject any part of that. But it's not boasting when our secure identity is in who we are in Christ already. What this is it's embracing who God made us to be. So if I look at myself in the mirror and say, I am a gift, I am unique and special, you might say, wow, that guy thinks he's all that. He thinks he's sure full of himself. But I would say to you, I would look at you, not in a mirror, but I would look at you in the eye, and I would say, you are a gift. God made you unique and special. And I would especially say that to you if you felt like you weren't those things, if you were down and were questioning your self-worth or where your value was coming from. And so do you see the double standard that we do here? Again, back to the greatest commandment, love others the way you love yourself, that I can say those things to you and really believe them for you. But if I say them to myself, or if you say them to yourself, go in the mirror, or pull out your phone and put it on selfie mode and say that. I am a gift. I'm unique and special. I wonder how it makes you feel. For me, it makes me feel kind of weird and embarrassed inside, and I hope nobody hears me saying those things. But that also comes from that deep sense of emptiness in me, of living for other people's applause and external validation, that I need other people to tell me that I'm good. I need other people's validation, that I don't already know it internally inside of me. And so continue on with this exercise of these affirmations. And yes, certainly you can use scripture. Romans 8 is wonderful. You can tell yourself, I'm a beloved son, daughter, child of the Father whom he loves and he's well pleased with. But I'd also encourage you not to hide behind scripture as these things that you can say about yourself and still not get to that in a sort of a generic way, and not get into that deeper, the way God made you, your sense of self. And so for me, that looked like saying, I am creative. I am funny, whether you agree with it or not, based on the last Noah's rant that you've listened to or that you skipped, right? And that's the whole thing with this is some of these things that I'm doing, they're because my counselor is saying, be yourself and like strengthen these muscles. So we talked about neural pathways last episode, and that our brains have told us that we're not safe, that we're not okay as we are, we're not good as we are, so we need all these other things. Go down the list. Could be the pornography, it could be the sexual fantasies, it could be the discontentment and singleness in marriage, it could be the external validation, the people pleasing, trying to the codependency, trying to solve other people's problems, those sorts of things that internally we don't believe that the neural pathways aren't there. They're not built. The muscle isn't strong, that we really believe that on our own, we actually are good. We actually have a strong sense of self. And so when I say to myself, I am creative, I am funny, I could start with these Noah's rants, which is just trying to be funny, kind of lighthearted thing that I do periodically on the flip side. And if you think they're funny, then they're funny. Then I'm funny, and I've been successful. That's a lot different than me going, I think I'm funny, and I think these are funny, and no one even has to agree with that. Nobody has to agree that I'm funny. I can tell myself with a sense of confidence, God made me funny, and there's evidence that's true. And it doesn't mean I'm as funny as like some top level comedian, but I can look at myself in the mirror and I can say I am creative, and I think we all are creative, and we all can work on those muscles in us that God has given us. But I am uniquely creative. It is one of my strengths, and when I'm able to sit with that, then what I'm able to do is write a science fiction novel. And not just write it, but really believe in it and believe in the uniqueness of it, versus that insecure writing that many writers are in, or people that have never written, and that say, well, I can't write this because no one will like it, or it won't be any good. What if you write it because it makes you feel alive? What if you do the Noah's rant because it makes you feel alive, because it gets in touch with a part of that true self that doesn't care what other people think, that you're doing this for yourself and for God because he loves you and he wants you to enjoy the ways he has made you to be. And for some of you are wired very differently than me. You certainly don't have to write a science fiction book or, make funny skits, or at least I thought they were funny. My wife doesn't. But again, the beauty of this is she doesn't have to, and I can still enjoy it. And that's back to the high school videos we made that are hilarious. I've thought about releasing them to the public at some point. I have all of them digitally. So I guess reach out to me, Patreon members, if you want to see that. Yeah. So this episode today, it's meant to give you some practical ideas of how to grow in this, and just try some of these things. And again, I would really encourage you to see a counselor and talk about, hey, I'd love to talk to you about codependency, sense of self, my people-pleasing tendencies, how I feel about myself, why it's hard for me to look in the mirror and say things like, I'm unique, I'm a gift, I'm special, I'm creative, I'm funny, or I'm smart. Or some of them for me are, I'm a good father, I'm a good husband, I'm a good pastor, I have a good heart. And some of those are directly to contradict messages of judgment and criticism and attack that have been sent my way over 22 years of being a pastor. And I tell you, man, one of those negative critical messages that's an attack gets stuck in here way more than 1,000 messages of praise or encouragement or whatever it may be. And so, yeah, we're all going to make mistakes. We're not being narcissists here. I mean, certainly someone who cares about you and loves you and respects your boundaries and wants to see what's best for you. It's okay to give some criticism to someone, but that's very different than someone, maybe criticism is the wrong word, constructive feedback. Hey, let's grow together. Let's hold each other accountable. Very different than this hypercritical, this person you can never please, back to codependency. And so then you try to please them, you never can, and because the problem is with them. They have a wound in them that they haven't dealt with, and you can't ever fix it. It'll never go away. They have to get the appropriate treatment for that wound for it to go away. They have to choose that. And you can only meet them halfway. You can only show them, hey, I see this. This is my boundary. I'm not going to have these conversations with you anymore. And those boundaries can look differently in different situations. But to protect yourself against those messages that are not true about yourself, and you can lean into others to ask, are these true about me? Are they not? But at the end of the day, these affirmations, just saying some of those I am statements are to directly contradict some of the PTSD that I live with from some of those comments or trend, people in my life where that was sort of the tattoo on me that they put on me. And I allowed myself, I gave them the let them theory. Mel Robbins mentioned that in part one of this. Talks a lot about that we choose to give someone power over us or not. And for many years, really I think most of the 20 years of my pastoral ministry, there were people that I gave my power to. I didn't have power of myself. I gave it to them. They dictated if I was good or bad based on these criticisms, and I did everything I could to try to satisfy them, and never could. So when I say reclaiming that sense of self, and it could be a relationship that you are in or were in, where the boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance, spouse is the one doing that to you, and you've lost your sense of self because of a similar sort of hyper-criticism, toxic sort of relationship that cuts much deeper when it's in a intimate relationship like that. It hurts bad enough in a church. It hurts bad enough. But this is something that we can get healing from with some of these principles. But get help with it. Don't just listen to a podcast. Do get help with this. It's been very freeing for me and very much a part of my spiritual formation. So some practical things. My brothers, my biological brothers. I got brothers in Christ. I got my Philippiac brothers, Pete and Patrick. A few years ago, we have a Marco Polo conversation that I really value. We keep in touch that way, and they're talking about their hobbies, and they asked me, what are your hobbies? And I'm a pastor, and I don't have hobbies. And I like to exercise and work out. By the way, I'm doing this one on video today, and the camera's stationary, but you can see I am in here it is, my Bazooka Mega Man shoulder harness sling from my shoulder surgery. Speaking of what I've always considered a hobby was, exercising, working out, running, but that's not really a hobby. I mean, it's healthy and you should do that. And if you're not taking care of yourself in that way, you should take steps towards it. That's part of our self-care. But for them, they're making things with their hands. They're creating things. And they said, what is your creative hobby that you do just for you? And I didn't have an answer to that. And from that conversation to these reflections today, I have realized that being a pastor, and I think other vocations would fall under this, doctors, and you could go down the line. Perhaps you can relate to this or not in your vocation, but as a pastor, you become Pastor Noah. And it's really a double whammy, because as Pastor Noah, you're no longer Noah. You're not supposed to do things like Noah's rants anymore about the wax, that tissue paper toilet seat cover that they have in the airport bathrooms. You're not supposed to talk about that. As a Pastor Noah, that'd be something that college Noah would have talked about and laughed and made jokes about. So we've kind of, you have to repress that part of yourself. You're not supposed to write science fiction books. You're definitely not supposed to write science fiction books that have swear words in them or that are really edgy in some of the concepts they talk about. That you're not supposed to do that because you're Pastor Noah. And there's so much of the real Noah that I lost in that, in becoming Pastor Noah. And it was always refreshing to hang out with my college friends who knew me, or to this day to hang out with them, who never knew me as Pastor Noah when we first met. They just knew me as Noah, this goofy guy from college that was, loved Jesus and had a great heart, but liked to make smart remarks and, just be goofy and, kind of bend the rules and be creative and things like that. So back to the hobbies, we're learning to reclaim that piece of us. And so for me, the double whammy of being a pastor was, one, you become Pastor Noah instead of Noah, and you have to kind of wear this front of what pastors are supposed to act like and look like. And that kills a lot of families. Let me just say that. That kills a lot of spouses. It kills a lot of children, like internally, where now the child or the spouse has to no longer be themselves. They have to put on like this outfit all the time. They talk about the fishbowl of being in a pastor's family. And so they can't be themselves. And then it becomes this sort of conjured, manufactured faith rather than a real faith with the ebbs and flows of doubts and questions and struggles. The other part of that double whammy with codependency is, wow, I realized just recently through learning about codependency with my counselor, reading Codependent No More by Melanie Beatty. Someday I'll look up how to say her name if I'm saying it wrong. And The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins, which I'm almost finished with both of those, that the role of a pastor, it is a fertile ground. It rewards codependency. And I think had a recent conversation with a friend that's a server at a restaurant, and I went, wow, there's a lot of connections to what you're describing. With this, I think a nurse could fall into the same role. A lot of caretaking roles could fall into these roles. But this idea that my job as a pastor, given to me by God and the church, and to be a successful church and to grow the church, a church plant that you're getting off the ground from 0 people up to a sustainable number, fueled by Bible verses about and genuine faith and belief that God can change people's hearts and lives, and that miracles can happen, and people's lives can change and they can repent, that it is my job to make people change. that if I pick you up and drive you to church enough times, if I have coffee with you enough times, if I give you enough advice, if I preach the right sermons, you will stop being an alcoholic. You'll stop having anger problems. You'll stop falling back into your addiction. You'll stop skipping out on church and drifting away from your faith. And then it's up to me to kind of, like, if these balloons are floating off the ground and there's a long string on them, I'm jumping up and I'm grabbing this balloon and I'm like, okay, I'm going to tie this back on the ground. And there's another one, got to run over and grab it before it gets out of the way and tie it back to the ground. Meanwhile, the ones I've tied to the ground are now loosening and heading back up. And you can spend your whole life as a pastor thinking it's your responsibility to solve other people's problems, and it is within your power and control to solve their problems. And that is codependency. And it rewards you for it. So that's that double whammy that I'm learning to that's why I'm burnt out or was. That's why I am continually a people pleaser and don't know how to say no. All of these things. So back to my brothers and the conversation about hobbies. That was a game changer for me. That was 2022. And I started to, I have things I know I'm not good at. And I'm not interested. I don't want to paint or draw or things like that. I started writing. I started writing a science fiction book. And I never thought I could write fiction. I just never thought I could. I never thought I'd be good enough. But I just started writing to see what would happen. And my brain thinks of things very easily. And I had a first scene in my head, and I wrote it down. It was in my brain. Just like I was watching it on a movie theater screen and my fingers typed onto the keyboard. I knew how the story was going to start, and I knew what the climax at the end was going to be. That was all I knew, and I just started writing. And I did this every day on my day off as a hobby for me, and it became the most freeing, fun gift from God that I've experienced, I could say at least since 2022, right, in the last 5 years, but really as long as I can remember. Like this gift to me that makes my right brain, the creative side, come alive. And with my ADHD diagnosis from 3-4 years ago now, so many things that are so much more difficult for me now than before the ADHD was in full bloom when it comes to organization and management, logistics, where the creative writing, the science fiction, this visualization of a story, writing it down, is the hyper focus. It's riding the wave of the superpower, as the Holderness family calls ADHD, and going, whoa, I love writing science fiction. Like, I love this. And I'm not kidding you. It's been 4 years now. July literally is 4 years of writing the same book. It's called Age of Ashes. The great feedback from beta readers, but basically I'm learning how to write. I'm taking the feedback now and going, whoa, they're correct. And when I was for enough distance away from my own writing, it's hard for me to read a lot of fiction. I can't read. There's only certain types of fiction I can read because of my ADHD. And I went back to read what I wrote maybe like a year after I wrote it, and it was unreadable. It was awful. But back to the point is that I'm doing a full rewrite now. I love it. I genuinely think it's really good. Now, granted, 4 years ago, I genuinely thought it was really good. I really think this is really good. I'm super excited about it. It is still my hobby. I still do it for me. But after 50 pages, 3.5 years ago or so, I went, whoa, I've written 50 pages of a book. I might as well finish it. Like, this is no longer just me doodling on a page. If you're an artist, this is me writing a fiction book. I can actually do this, and I love it. And what was happening was the story is developing in my brain without my control. Like, my fingers are literally trying to just keep up with the pictures happening, the story that's happening in my brain. I don't know what's happening next. It's like a choose your own adventure when I have to make a decision. Just a blast. And to this day, if I could do anything all day, it would be that. And I've loved it for 4 years. And so I share that as a way of saying, what are your hobbies? Like, what are the things you do that someone says, what do you do just for you? And TV does not count. I would say video games do not count. Anything with a screen does not count. Exercise can certainly count. I do enjoy exercising, but think the next. So do you go on walks? Do you hike? Do you go out into nature? Something you can do for your self-care for you that comes from this belief that you do matter, and this core belief, when you start to get stronger in it, it allows you to say no. It allows you to say, I literally can't love others if I don't love myself. And part of loving others is saying no to others and saying no, that I can't do everything. But it's getting it at the deep level of belief and experience, not just I heard this in a sermon or I read it in a book and I've written it on an index card and I have to just kind of remind myself that I need to say no, to people, for example. I think the other, there's all kinds of hobbies that you could think of, but my next question would be, what is your next sort of excuse for why you don't do them? And that, I think, is really telling, because we some of our excuses would say, well, I don't have time. Well, why don't you have time? And some of that could be you're doing things with your free time that aren't truly loving yourself. Like you're like just sitting around watching TV and vegging out. I mean, an occasional show here and there is fine, but vegging out on TV and video games is not loving yourself. So there could be a misuse of the time you have that you're spending on yourself, but not in a self-care sort of way, where you're like, no, I matter and value. I'm going to do things that really build into me and to my whole, my whole health and rediscovering who I really am, this sense of self. As a person, but also with this idea of the hobbies when it comes to ourself, and it could be that we're mismanaging the free time that we have, or, and I think it's true for a lot of us, we would say, I can't do things for myself because I'm always doing things for other people. And this goes for parents too. If you're in that hectic stage, your kids matter very much, but you matter too. And you are going to be a much better parent and spouse if that's the season of life you're in. You're going to be a much better parent and spouse if you're taking care of yourself and if you're taking care of your marriage when it comes to your kids than just killing yourself, driving your kids all over town, all over the state or region to every sports tournament, the elite soccer, the elite baseball, the elite dance, music, the music, and just piling all of these things up. I mean, we're in this stage of culture with parenting that, yes, we need to invest in our kids' lives, but we have sacrificed our sense of self for just overactivity for our kids. Just to boil it down to this sense of self that we're talking about today, you matter. You need. I give you permission. God gives you permission because He loves you, and He says, I want you to treat yourself like the way you treat people that you love, because I love you. I want you to believe that you are lovable, that you are worthy of love, that you are a gift, that you are unique and special. And you can certainly look at it both ways, where to love others, which we want to do well, we have to preserve ourselves, because we need to love out of a sense of wholeness and surplus, not loving out of a sense of emptiness and desperation. And if I don't love this person, if I don't do this for them, if I don't help them, again, this is well beyond just children in a nuclear family setting, that I have to help everyone. I have to help, every person I come in contact that has a need, that it's up to me to fix their problem. And that could be an addict. It could be someone, it could be your job, people in your field. It could be working late, overtime, all the time for your boss and for your company. And that we're doing those things out of a sense of emptiness and desperation, that if I don't do this thing to help or save this person, then I am worthless, then I am this utter failure. Versus, I know that I am already loved. I know that I am God's beloved child, and I am a gift and special and unique. And I want to love others and show them the love that God has for them, that He has for me. But the only way I can do that is to model it. I have to model that you are worth it by modeling that I am worth it. And to model that I am worth it, I have to have boundaries that allow me to be my healthy sense of self. And by enjoy life, I don't mean buy every cruise to Tahiti and, and buy the biggest car and house that you can. Those things have their place at times. I'm talking about a sense of rest. Do you have a sense of rest? Does life feel hectic all the time and frantic? Do you have a sense of peace? Do you have a sense where you know that you have agency and control over feeling joy and joy and peace and wholeness and fulfillment in your life, despite negative circumstances elsewhere, despite someone else's behavior, that you can detach from their behavior and unenmesh yourself from it and take back that power, control, agency to say, no, I actually have ways, hobbies are one of them, to live according to these core values that I have, that God has built into me. And one of my top core values is rest and margin. And that's because I lived so long without it. And I'm finally learning how to actually live with rest and margin from a deep foundational DNA level. And it makes saying no possible. And I do it without guilt now. And I'm not fully there. I still have guilt at times. I'm growing these muscles. I'm building these new neural pathways. But there's so much freedom in this to get to do the things I love and enjoy, like writing a science fiction book, and still learning how to do that, saying no to certain church responsibilities in this part-time role. I'm lead pastor, but I am part-time. And so saying no to certain things that I normally would have said yes to, so that I can say yes to me, to the thing I love, which is writing the science fiction, and me to the thing I love, which is rest and margin. And that having that boundary is what I need to do that. But like I said, it models it to you, even to a very unhealthy person. A lot of unhealthy people, and I've been one of them in the past, they're not going to understand boundaries. Like, they don't live by boundaries, and they're expecting you to solve their problem. And they have a victim mentality about themselves, and they haven't taken responsibility for themselves, and they don't love themselves enough to do that yet. And so they are the first people that are going to throw your boundaries right back in your face. That's kind of a sign that you did it right. But even in that, you're modeling to them, even if they reject it, maybe down the line, they'll remember, I remember when Noah, I remember when you, listener, I remember when you laid that boundary down for me there in a therapy session 5 years from now. Hypothetically, you're still modeling that to them and to others. This is what it means to walk the way of Jesus in a pace that is manageable, where I'm not acting like I'm God, and I'm letting God do his job, and I'm going to do my job, and I'm going to love people, but I know that I can't fix people. I don't have the power to do that. So releasing myself from that. So just wrapping up here, when you do this, you don't have to put on a front for other people, for external validation. You know who you are. You're secure in it. It's the process of building muscles. Again, back to my Mega Man arm here. I can't bend it too much because I don't want to redo the surgery, but I am not left-handed at all. This is my left hand here. I am the most right-handed person probably in existence. I'm forced right now to be left-handed because I'm in the sling for 6 weeks, and it's non-weight bearing for 3 weeks of that, and it's wild, and it's hard. It's frustrating to have to train my brain to train these muscles to do things like brush my teeth, or just trying to do things one-handed that I drop things all the time, carrying things. But in that process, I'm getting stronger and better at doing it. And that's what you and I are doing when we build these muscles, these neural pathways of our sense of self. We're training ourselves to be left-handed if we're right-handed, or we're training ourselves to be right-handed if we're left-handed. We're using muscles that have never been used before, so it's going to take time. But at the end of the day, we are teaching ourselves, that deep core part of us, that our needs are met in Jesus and who God made us to be. We are already good, so I don't need my wife to tell me that I'm good. I don't need my wife to be the external validation for me. I don't need my job. I don't need, you don't need your job, your boss, the accolade, the attaboy, the metric, the sales, whatever, the approval from others. You need to go do this in order to look cool. Those needs are already met, and I'm already safe. Back to the PTSD example from part 1 of this. Laying in bed, I went outside as a young child and something very dangerous happened, so now I'll never go outside again. I'm going to stay in bed with the covers over me, and that will be my life, because that's what makes me safe. That's what my anxiety tells me to be safe. All for this idea of PTSD. Something bad did happen to you at one time, but then that bad thing, that trauma wound, it trained your neural pathways, it trained your nervous system to think that it is always unsafe, or that certain triggers come that remind your nervous system of that relationship or of that experience. And as soon as the trigger comes, boom, you go into PTSD mode, which with the military metaphor, which is very real, it's that you experienced combat and you experienced people dying and you experienced bullets in the air, and now you're not in combat. And, you hear a sound, and it's the sound of a firework or a car going off, and your central nervous system says you're back in a very unsafe, warfare sort of way. And these are very real type of PTSD. But that's true for all of us. The same type of thing happening in us emotionally from relationships, from things that have harmed us in the past, where we're not in that space anymore. We are safe. Our needs are met, but we have to learn these new ways of, I don't want to say convincing, but of retraining, of reclaiming the truth that I'm safe, that I am good, that my needs are met, and I don't need these externals to do it. So I hope this is helpful to you. Again, both of these episodes are meant to stir some things up. If you connect with any of this, start going to see a counselor if you don't yet. I love it. It's been one of the most helpful things in my life, and I can connect with some of the resources that I mentioned, the Let Them theory, codependency, no more, I should say, and take these things before the Lord and let Him show you. Let him expose some of these things to you, and then just take some steps. Like I said, those first affirmations I did in the mirror felt very uncomfortable. The more I did them, the more I just saw the fruit of them. I just went, whoa, this actually is working. So maybe re-listen to this episode and take some notes on some next steps you can take, and take a step. Have someone hold you accountable to taking a step, in these areas. So a couple flip side pieces before we head out. Thanks again for listening. Hop over on patreon.com/NoahFilipiak if you want to be a part of the Patreon community. Also, a reminder, my new book, Shelter in the Storm, is coming out September 1st. You can get pre-sale copies of it now. It is a 40-day devotional through the Psalms, and it hits on our circumstances not changing when we pray that they change, and where is God in all of that. And I think it'll be a very helpful guide to you, as it has been to me. I love the Psalms. They're a place we can go when we can't go anywhere else in Scripture or in our prayer life, and there's so much hope there. So check that out. Thanks again for watching, listening to The Flip Side. I will see you next time on The Flip Side.
The Flip Side with Noah Filipiak is a Beyond Ministries production. Copyright Noah Filipiak. www.noahfilipiak.com. Theme music by Kyle Lake at K-Lake Music. Used with permission. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe wherever podcasts are found.
It's time to bring me closer. There's no purgatory, cause you're in or you're out. When you see him in the clouds, then you know it's going down. Raise them, raise them, raise them. They've been sleeping for some ages. Now all God's babies so confused by this hatred. Pulpit preachers shouldn't aim to be A-list. Money probably long, but short is what your days.